want to say I am currently in Atlanta, Georgia. It is north of the city in a city called Kennesaw. So if you happen to be near my area, please reach out. It would be great to connect. I love seeing people in person. I love meeting people in person. Yes, we are going to talk about, even within the context of an event that is so focused on technology, we are going to take time to talk about that perky word, relationship. I stayed and I've been watching a few of the presentations. I stayed for this very last presentation, was absolutely blown away, loved it, and hopefully she's still on and um, is listening to me thank her for the presentation. Mainly because it aligns very well with the topic of building relationships. And as a matter of fact, we're talking about giveaways, and you'll hear about this in a little bit. But part of what we're going to be doing today is integrating a conversation about technology with a conversation about relationship development, and the very thing that as technologists we support, that ongoing relationship that exists internally at companies between IT organizations, support organizations, and meeting and aligning with the needs of the business is really what the book is about. And I encourage you to read it if you haven't read it yet. It's a really great resource, especially if you're launching customer engagement projects, customer relation management projects, and you get a little bit stuck. That's really a great time to read the book. Or even, better yet, if you're kind of contemplating the use of technology, if you're trying to convince some of your stakeholders about the value of technology like customer engagement, customer relationship management, and I'll talk about the term in a second, but if you're in the process of convincing a stakeholder or a customer or client about the value of building relationships, about increasing engagement, about connecting with the experience, this book is really a great resource to be able to do that. Today, we are going to be covering probably two or three chapters within the book. I'm not going to talk about everything, but I do encourage you to read the book and learn a little bit more about what we affectionately call CRM to the people. And this came a long time ago at one of our Microsoft events. Someone brought up the fact that maybe we need to have a mantra, need to have some steps, some conversations that are important to the success of implementation that ultimately is going to help us manage relationships, and it's going to help us enable the people within our company that help us build those relationships, right? So I am going to talk about that today. I do want to pause for a second, and hopefully you are on the phone. Maybe you're not, but I want to acknowledge some of the people that helped me through that journey. These days, I spend a lot of my time at the very beginning of projects, or sometimes when technology projects kind of go array. But I spend a lot of time at the very front of the project talking about what are the objectives, what are the expectations that we need to set for technology enabled relationship development. And that journey has been a very long journey. In fact, all the way back, some of you may hear me use the term sales logics, all the way back to ACT and sales logics. And my friend Pat Sullivan, who brought me into this industry all the way through the last few years, implementing projects with industry experts, building industry solutions like CRM for Legal, being part of some amazing projects in relationship with a lot of people, including my current role teaching CRM and teaching customer engagement and customer experience at 14 universities here in the United States. So thank you. I don't think that success is something we do alone. So I wanted to thank these people who've helped me in that journey. So thank you for that. So I want to start today with a story, and I love telling this story because it really makes a great point about the way that our customers and even us ourselves internally perceive this idea of expectation management and this idea of managing experiences. So I'll be very brief, but I got to tell you because it's a fun story. Some years back, I was at an event in Orange County. I had decided to go down to La Jolla Cove in San Diego area to see the seals. It's a great spectacle, beautiful area with a lot of seals and seagulls. It's absolutely stunning. I was so distracted with going down to San Diego that I completely overlooked that I needed to book a room. And so I, in a rush, went out to Airbnb. I booked a room. I was leaving the next morning very quickly. And so a room at $85 in Orange County, not bad. If you're being in that area, it can be kind of expensive during an event. I booked a room on Airbnb and I went on my way. The first clue to something going wrong should have been the fact that after I dropped off my rental and then got an Uber over to the location, my first clue that something had gone wrong is the fact that this Airbnb was in an abandoned strip mall. So a line of stores outside near a neighborhood in an abandoned building. And so that in itself was a clue to bad news. But as I went into the room, into the building, in an abandoned spa, by the way, of all things, I started thinking about what I had originally booked, which is what you see on the screen right now. And I was thinking about my expectations for what I had purchased, my relationship with Airbnb as a vendor, and then the experience that I expected that looked something like this: a room, a bed, with what looks like, I don't know, maybe a cryogenic time machine. I don't know what that is. At the time, I didn't know. Um, and then the realization that what I got was that. Now I'm going to let the screen refresh and I'm going to let you catch your breath for a second, because if you're thinking to yourself, that looks like a bed in a bathroom. If that's what you're thinking right now, that maybe what I was expecting was a small room with a bed and a bathroom, turned out to be a bathroom with a bed on the floor, then you are correct. That is exactly what I ended up getting. Now, I mentioned a second ago that I teach this topic and customer related and technology topics at several universities in the US. And so I show this picture to my students, and they always go straight to the typical questions that you may be asking here today, right? Like, did I go to Airbnb and complain? How did I book this? Those of you who are more involved in technology, thank you, Victor, for letting me know that it is visible. All right, I'll let you address that. And if you can't see it, please let me know, because that visual is big. So people ask questions about, all the things you can imagine. Did I go on? Did it pay for my? Did I happen to have the name of the person that I booked the room with? What did they do about it? Did I get refunded for the room? Now, before I answer that question, I usually tell people that there's more to the story. And it happens to be that as I leave this room at 2 a.m. in the morning to head out to Orange County, I get picked up by a driver who, of course, is not expecting a gentleman sitting with a suitcase in the middle of a parking lot at 2 a.m. in the morning in the dark next to an abandoned strip mall. So as I'm seeing him pass by towards the neighborhood where he expected to go, I decided to start running in the middle of the parking lot in the dark towards him, only to surprise him and have him completely freeze and not open the door until I started telling him it was me, his ride, and he finally opened the door. Except for the fact that when he opened the hatchback to allow me to put the suitcase in, a very large cloud of a substance that happens to be only legal in certain parts of the world happened to puff from the very, very back of the car. Well, I'll leave the story there. I'll let you read the rest of the story in the book. But uh, as you can imagine, it was a very interesting trip. And yes, my students kind of asked me about the ride, asked me about all the typical things that you ask when something happens or goes wrong in the experience. And surprisingly, what I respond, what I tell them in response to their questions about, did the website tell me more about the room? Was the description clear? Did the person that rent me that room show me exactly what I was getting for my money? Did I get the value for my money? In the middle of all those conversations, I always respond that to me, ultimately, only I can make that determination on how well the experience went, how someone rates the level of engagement or how much of a relationship I have with the brand is only really up to me and my perception, which is a very, very subjective perception of experience. And that, I think, is where we get into trouble. And we have a lot of different names for what we've called over the years customer relationship management. I have to be very honest with you for reasons that will become very obvious to you here in a second, that anytime somebody says that CRM is dead, or that CRM is a thing of the past, or that CRM is going away, or somebody relabels any strategy, process, or technology that was identified as CRM with something else, it really hurts my heart. And it's because we've been studying customer relationship management and the idea that you've got to manage your relations with customers in an intentional way for many, many, many years. I do not expect you to read the stuff that's on the screen. I'm going to give you the slides here eventually, but we've been studying CRM for a long time. And the one thing that over the years comes out almost consistently, whether it be from a strategic perspective or it be an IT director or a VP of IT that brings this up, people always bring up that quote from 2007 that says that most likely CRM projects are going to fail, and that most CRM projects fail by about 75 and 80%. Recent numbers have shown that yes, that increases and decreases with time, changes in technology. It has gone down as low as 45% and as high as 85% failure rate when it comes to CRM technology implementation. Here's the thing, and this is what I want you to focus on today. It is true that when people are asked, companies, different sizes across the world are asked, if their customer engagement project, customer relation management project, whatever it is that you want to insert there, whatever name we're going to give it in the future, whether it be that we address needs and then went out and address issues, even without the implementation of a large CRM project, but we went directly to deploying a Power App, right? No matter what that is, that project, the catch is that what people were really asked, that the question they were asked to which they respond that CRM fail is a response related to expectation. In other words, people were not asked, did the project fail? Because in many cases, technology projects are very, very effective. They are managed within budget. They are completed on time. But when you ask the people that project was intended to add value to, about the outcomes and expectations of the project, it is then that people say that they fail by a rate of 75 to 85%. So I want to make sure that, if you're going to walk away from this presentation with anything in mind, and I want you to remember, is that what the numbers are showing us, what studies consistently show us all the way to today, to 2022, is that when we do not manage the expectations of the people who are going to use the technology, implement the technology, use technology to solve problems, that in those cases, CRM projects and technology projects, customer engagement projects fail. Now, to you, that may not be a surprise, but to some of you, it may be extremely surprising to know that so much of what we do on a daily basis in solving problems for our customers and our companies relies so much on the perception of people who are using the technology and whether or not that technology meets expectations. And I know that we have a very large stack from within the Microsoft ecosystem, and many of you are focused on one specific aspect of the technology. Some of you are broader in addressing strategic components and the use of technology enablement, and some of you are sort of in between. Some of you may be customers who are trying to figure out, how do we use this technology to solve problems? Well, guess what? If you can at least start by having a conversation of expectations, you are going to solve a lot of the problems that we run into in technology. And those expectations, no surprise, have more to do with relationship development have more to do with expectations about how the relationship is managed more than anything else. And here's the reason why it hurts me so much. It kind of hits me right in the heart when somebody says that CRM is dead. And that's because, true, the concept that we've come to call CRM over the years has not adequately addressed the needs of people. But it is still true that what we are doing through technology, 100%, and any step that we take towards success with technology implementation must address the very components at the heart of what we call CRM. The first part being that, yes, all of us are in business to manage customers, to meet the needs of customers. All of us are meeting value propositions that our companies have set up, and we align those customer expectations with our value proposition. And when there's clear alignment between what the customer needs and what we have and how we deliver it, and the relationship expectations that dictate what the outcome is going to look like, if we can then take that and manage those expectations, and in this day and age, we can't really do it much without the use of technology, because technology is so closely related to what we do and so embedded into our lives. It is then that we can actually succeed, right? Manage customers, win the right customers, keep the right customers, understand the value they expect from us, manage the relationship expectations that they bring to the table that align our value with their expectations, and then find a way to effectively manage those expectations through measurements that are tangible and attainable. And here's what I mean by that. If you think in general about those three words, and I want you to just erase from your head all the bad taste of CRM projects, CRM labels, call it customer engagement, call it customer centricity, call it whatever you want. But keep in your mind the idea that we are still managing expectations of customers, that those expectations are largely relational in nature, and that eventually somebody at your company and somebody on the customer side are going to have to manage those expectations. Keeping that in mind, there are two elements that the technologist and the strategist has an opportunity to manage at the very base level to find success, not only in managing the customer relationship, but also in implementing technology that's going to help them manage and meet those expectations. There's two concepts that I want you to think about. And here in a second, I'm going to encourage you to grab a pen, grab OneNote, whatever it is your preferred method for keeping notes. I want you to write down those two concepts, and I'm going to encourage you to apply them to all different aspects of managing relationships through technology enablement. But first, the foundation of those concepts is very much about delivering value. There is a concept called independent theory that, or so you may know it by social exchange theory, that says in all our relationships, in our perception of whether or not we have received the outcomes we expected from a transaction, from a relationship, from working for a company, from selling a product or service, from implementing it, from completing a project, that all those things, when it comes to us as human beings, has a lot to do with how people calculate the reward they expected from the cost they had to pay for it. Now, let me put that in context with what we do from technology every day, and from that quote that I mentioned earlier, where people say that most of the technology projects that we implement fail because of expectations. If I go out to market and I sell an application, and that application is delivered on time, on budget, they love your teams, they see the value of the technology in and of itself, how modern it is, how innovative it is, people will not acknowledge that they got the outcome they expect unless they feel that the cost they pay for it was not more than the reward they got. People align costs with rewards when it comes to outcome. So if I implement technology, but it did not achieve the expected outcome from a business perspective, then that technology will be considered to be either not worth investing in or far more of the cost that people expect. And as a reminder, that cost could also be not only in terms of money, but in terms of aggravation, in terms of dealing with people, lack of enjoyment, et cetera, et cetera. So keep that in mind that when it comes to overall implementation of projects that build relationships, that build quality relationships, that allow your customers to then deliver value relationships to their customers, that equation is going to be always in the back of people's minds, which is I'm going to calculate the reward or the cost that I spend from the reward that I wanted as an outcome, and I'm going to make a determination of whether or not it really met my expectations. Number two, when people look at customer relationship management as a concept and as a technology, they also think in terms of cost when it comes to functionality, accessibility, and even emotional connection. Meaning that at every level of the relationship, through implementation cycles, the things that technology does to give value to people, people are also thinking not only about the balance of reward and cost, but also thinking about what is it costing them in terms of functionality, effectiveness, ease, accessibility, and enjoyment. This happens to be, by the way, at the very heart of the human-centered design thinking concepts that we are embedding into many technology projects today, because design thinking is always asking this question. It's going out and validating whether or not we are giving people the reward they expected and that the cost align with it. That in the end, when they are, when they have technology in hand and they ask the question of whether or not this technology met expectations, they are asking, did I get what I needed? Did it work as intended? Those are, functionality components that you do every day. You wouldn't do user testing until the very end because you're asking the question of whether something was functional. But within that question, it's also the idea of did it work as intended? So keep in mind that we always evaluate the outcome of technology in relationship development outcomes in terms of functionality, in terms of effectiveness, but also in terms of ease and accessibility. We're always asking the question, even if something works, how easy is it to use? How easy is it to get to the intended outcome? How accessible is the data or the insights that implementation intended to give us? And largely, there's also an emotional component that we need to consider, which is the enjoyment component. So, where do we manage relationships? If that is the case, if many technology projects fail, truly fail, and that 85% failure rate, it's really coming from not meeting expectations. And if those expectations have a lot to do with the fact that people feel that it costs them too much to get the outcome they expected in terms of functionality, in terms of um, uh, ease, in terms of accessibility, in terms of enjoyment, where should we be looking? Where should we be evaluating and managing expectations as outcomes when it comes to technology enabling relationships? Well, much of what I've written over the last 10 years has been about the psychology of relationship development. And more recently, at least over the last 5 years, I've been focusing more on how people have embraced technology as a means to make relationship development more functional, more accessible and easy, and more enjoyable, and found that there are 7 very specific areas where we need to be managing expectations. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about things that have to do with human nature and relationship development. And I want you to remember that in today's environment, those things can be enabled, can be made easy, can be made functional, can be made enjoyable through technology in 7 specific areas. Those areas, by the way, are things that you probably know because you know that when it comes to building a relationship, and if I can put it in a few different boxes, if you're here and you're on the call, and you are part of a IT organization that is supporting a business client, That customer is busy building relationships with internal stakeholders and trying to win business with external customer stakeholders. If you are a partner, there's a relationship that exists between you and Microsoft and other technology vendors that has to be managed and is often managed through technology. And as a partner, of course, you have clients who in turn have their clients, and that relationship is a nice circle of stakeholders that manages the definition of that relationship, the specific aspects of who people are in that relationship, level of engagement, level of knowledge, level of accountability, level of transparency, and of course, how the relationship definition also defines what the experience looks like, which is something we manage often, also in the same terms of functionality, accessibility, and emotional connection. So, time to grab your pen, try to write down some notes, and I want to spend the rest of our time together showing you what I found to be the most effective criteria for implementing technology, especially customer engagement platforms and CRM platforms, that directly impact the expectations of relationships, both internal and external to companies. As you write this down, I want to encourage you to ask this question. Ask the question today, if the expectation is that I leverage technology to help my customers and their customers, my clients or their clients, or my patients or my constituents or my members, whatever it is that you call that customer, internal or external. I want you to think, if technology is intended to help them, how in these 7 areas am I doing well, and what things do I need to go and improve? Ideally, and I share this in the book, ideally, I promote that you have a conversation about these 7 things and first understand what are the relationship expectations, what are the things that technology is helping enable within relationship development before you implement any technology, before you launch any solution, before you propose any solution. And for some of my clients, I've actually, especially when they're very early in the process, where they've not selected technology, where technology discussions have not happened, I encourage people to, rather than functional requirements, that they start building customer relationship objectives down, that those functional criterias and functional requirements are going to help meet. Relationship first, and then we can have technology enable that relationship in the most direct way, so that overall the project then is perceived as meeting the expectations of the people that we serve. So number 1, I want you to think about this one very, very, very objectively, because sometimes we can be subjective about the kinds of business. Some people are here managing patients, some people are managing civil servants, some people are managing technology clients, some people are managing retail clients. And so we tend to kind of get very subjective about where the process starts and what technology enables in terms of those processes. But I want you to think about, how is technology today enable the relationship management aspect of definition. And what I mean by this is, if I implement a CRM system tomorrow, as a technologist, and I'm not calling names and I'm not pointing fingers, but I did this myself for many, many years. I got very, very enamored with the technology, right? I went out and implemented Dynamic CRM, 365 platform. Today, we work with a lot of clients that are doing, Power Apps, and get really enamored with how cool the technology is. But we don't take time to find out how the technology is going to give people the outcomes they expect and make it functional, easy, and enjoyable to define relationships. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Not every relationship is a great relationship. And so we leverage technology within CRM to do things like capturing leads, filtering clients, giving companies an opportunity to ask questions. The franchise world, for example, is a great example where, you would never invite someone to own a franchise of your company unless you know that they are qualified, or unless you know that they've got the funds and that they got the background and the ability to make the investment into that franchise. Not every customer is a good fit. And so, how does technology help us define that there is equity, that there's mutual value in the relationship? How is technology helping us define what those outcomes are and communicating those outcomes? How is technology helping us manage the definition of the terms, the conditions, the types of relationships that we want to build? And as I said before, how does it help us determine that a certain customer is getting the value that we promise, or that a certain customer aligns with our value, right? Think about those things. It's not really a matter of how easy it is to put a lead capture form on a website when that lead capture form could be capturing thousands and thousands of prospects that are not a good fit for our value. And in the same way, we could implement a process within technology like CRM that is sending information to people, engaging people, but that does not give us insight into which customers are no longer the right fit for our brand. Now, many of you are also implementing Net Promoter Score, meaning that you're asking your customers on a scale from 0 to 10 how likely they are to recommend you to others. And the Net Promoter Score is really a great way to identify people who may be detractors in your business, people who are not even interested in being your customers. Technology can do really well in doing that. But remember, definition is a relational thing. When I first met my wife many years ago, and we went on our first date, I was thinking about things like, am I the right person to deliver value? Is that value equitable? I was asking questions like the ones that I've mentioned, right? Is this relationship working out? Is it of mutual value? Is it easy to manage? Is it enjoyable? I was asking those questions. On my first date, if at the end of the first date, I had turned to my then girlfriend or, intended girlfriend, and I said, hey, we had a really great date. So on a scale from 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend me to others? Very silly question, right, to ask somebody, because it separates something from being very transactional from being very relational. So keep that in mind, that technology can enable many aspects of how we define relationships, how we determine whether the relationship is still equitable, and it must enable that for your users, it must enable that for your company, and it must make that process of defining relationships and value from a perception of functionality, accessibility, and emotional connection. The second aspect is centricity. And, we've labeled CRM in the past. Now we call it CE. Used to call it customer centricity, but we kind of lose sight of what centricity is. Every person is different. And the idea of centricity is getting to the center of who people are. Now, from a functional perspective, this value outcomes that I've been talking about, and this making it functional, making it effective, making it easy, accessible, making it enjoyable aspect of providing value, may be that you build a site or implement a system that may need to be localized for international users. It may be that it needs to be English, it may need to be Dutch, it may need to be French. Those aspects of personalizing technology are very much a part of centricity. But centricity is also about using technology to get to the heart of who people are from a cultural perspective and also from a values perspective. Keep in mind that, in this very call, we probably have at least, I'm going to guess, at least 20 languages, at least 20 countries represented. And so making it effective, easy, and enjoyable may have nothing to do with the actual functionality of the screen. It may have to do with acknowledging where people are individually, their economic condition, the language that they speak, the background they come from, the values that they believe in, their view of the world, and not only national culture, but also organizational culture, right? Many companies fail in implementing technology like CRM, for example, when they implement a system that is very much working in the way that their own culture works and their own organizational culture works, but then it makes it harder for their customers to use the same systems because they have a different culture, both national and organizational. So keep that in mind. How is technology best enabling relationship development by making sure that the individual, the centric needs of people are being met both within the organization and outside of the organization? And I hope that you're taking notes because we are going to have time for questions, and I'd love to maybe get some feedback back from you on which of these aspects of relationship development are you having the most challenge or the greatest challenge when it comes to technology, making it functional, easy, and enjoyable. The third component is one that we talk about a lot. And this one may be easier to understand because all of us are in some way trying to improve engagement through different channels. The technology that we use every day has components that allow people to communicate with one another. But let me challenge you right now, and let me encourage you to disconnect the word engagement strictly from communication channels, although it is definitely about that. But I want to encourage you from this to disconnect engagement from the words chat, from the word email, from the word phones, from the word but, from the word, all these different words that we equate and connect engagement to channels to technology. And I want you to, in turn, think about how is technology going to, well, first of all, I want you to think about whether or not the people that you're serving are accessing the correct channels. Because, myself included, I'm guilty of this. Once more, I get so enamored with technology that I want to give my customers every single most potentially innovative technology available to communicate, and never once ask the question, what is the most effective way for you to communicate? And then second to the most effective way to communicate, I sometimes fail to ask my clients, what is the most effective way to engage? The reason I separate the two is because communication is one thing, and we can throw a lot of communications and messages to people, but engagement requires connection. Engagement requires participation. Engagement requires creating an environment that compels people to want to create value with us. The sweet spot for engagement when it comes to technology enablement is to build channels and enable technology that encourages people to want to connect with us and create value together. That encourages internal stakeholders to create value together, that encourages the customer to create value with your brand, because they found that engagement channel, that engagement tool, that engagement solution, they found it so functional, they found it so effective, they found it so easy and accessible and so enjoyable that they're going to use it, and that interaction is going to end in engagement. Now, the next few concepts can be a little bit hard to grasp for some people because they're married to one another. So yes, technology should help us define relationships better, manage relationships better, get to outcomes faster, and then also tell us whether there are some relationships that are not equitable so that we can manage them accordingly. That technology should also enable our ability to serve people where they are based on their national, cultural, organizational background. It should help us to allow them to engage better and more deeply into the channels that they need. But it should also allow us to get to the level of mastery required to do all those things, right? When I buy a product, if I were to buy a product tomorrow, there are going to be products that I buy that are easy to use, that I may be familiar with, and I may never once call a company to find out about them. Maybe I used it before, and so I have that level of knowledge. But can technology make it easier for me to access that knowledge that I need at the level that I need it, should I require that knowledge? Can technology enable my people internally, whether it be in a call center or in a contact center or at a sales, marketing, and support function, can technology make it easier, effective, more enjoyable for people to get the knowledge and then share that knowledge with customers? Can technology build relationship by letting people access knowledge on a self-help basis, right? The challenge with technology is that oftentimes we make assumptions about knowledge. We don't collect it effectively when we talk to a customer. We don't collect that knowledge. We don't collect tribal knowledge effectively. So, in the process of relationship development, knowledge is very important. We evaluate a relationship based on the other person's ability to deliver on the expectations of that relationship, and that sometimes requires additional knowledge. And to some extent, some people have expectations of mastery. When I talk to people about contact center technology, and I ask them, do you have the ability to escalate a call, for example? I'm not thinking in terms of a level one agent not having the ability to answer that question. I think more in terms of what is the expectations of the customer, or what are the expectations of the customer about our level of knowledge. Some companies, customers think, if I need knowledge, I'm going to go to YouTube and I'm going to find it. Some customers have the expectation that they're going to go to you for that knowledge, and it has to be at the highest level of knowledge. And you have to manage those expectations and figure out how technology is going to make knowledge management and knowledge access functional, easy, and enjoyable. The other concept that I told you was very married to it is the idea of relationship development when it comes to accountability. Sometimes people don't want to know how to solve a problem. They come to you with an expectation that you are going to solve the problem, no matter how much they know or don't know. And that's more about accountability than anything else. Knowledge and accountability go hand in hand. And I'm a firm believer that technology can really help us be more proactive in meeting the needs of people and clarifying the needs and expectations of people. As a matter of fact, I have seen and implemented many processes that proactively address contractual issues, obligations, things that are part of my business that build trust with customers because I am proactively meeting those expectations and I'm being accountable to the terms of that agreement. And so, as you're writing your notes down, where are your challenges in this area? Both knowledge and accountability. How is technology making you a more knowledgeable company and a more accountable company? And the last two concepts, and I want to kind of wrap it up here and open up to questions. The last two concepts can be not only enabled by technology, but very much human concepts. From the technology perspective, yes, technology can help us be more transparent, meaning that just like we're giving our customers knowledge to use our products and services, we can also use technology to proactively inform the consumer or the customer or the client about who our company is, who our brand is. Transparency has a lot to do with giving people access to the knowledge that they need to trust us. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever watched the movie Aladdin, not the recent one with Will Smith, but the animated Aladdin years ago, where there's this at the very beginning of the movie, Aladdin and Jasmine are running through the streets of Agrabah. They get down to this building. The guards are chasing them. They get to the very top of the building, and Aladdin extends his hand and goes, "Do you trust me?" And I have daughters, and when my daughter was around 8, 9 when that movie came out, and we were watching that scene together, and Aladdin says, "Do you trust me?" And my first reaction was, "Heck no, I don't trust you. You just met this dude, and you're on top of a building, and you expect her to jump off the building with you." And as humorous as that may sound, it's sort of what we expect our customers to do. A lot of times we say, "Oh, trust us because we have this amazing technology in place, and we have this amazing systems in place, and those systems tell you about our brand and our service and our product. But the reality is that people will never trust you unless they have the insights necessary to trust you, right? To make a decision to trust you. So write that down today. How could you use technology in a better way to increase trust by giving people the insight they need to make decisions about you? And I'm not talking about just the customer, by the way. I'm also talking about people internally. My good friend Chuck Ingram has this phrase that I absolutely love. And he says, are you asking, is your technology unable to answer the questions that your business is asking? And that is so true. Oftentimes, we implement technology, but we don't give people clear, transparent insight into data that allows them to make decisions, right? There's a difference between data and insight. Data is informational, is relational in nature. We use that data, and depending on our access to that data, to formulate insights. Technology can jump that and take people directly to the insight they need, both customers, external and internal, to make decisions that lead to trust. Now, finally, the last concept in relationship development is the idea of experience. And now, I know I'm going to get some nasty emails from some people, but I want you to hear me out. You know, in teaching customer experience for the last 7 years, one of the things that I challenge my students to do is to remember that, yes, the idea of experience and those concepts that I mentioned, especially the idea that you should be making things more functional, effective, easier, accessible, and enjoyable for your own users, should translate to how you're making that also functional, effective, easy, and enjoyable for your customers, right? That's how you improve the experience. But where I challenge people to think deeper about experience is the fact that it is very difficult to go out and do journey mapping exercises, create personas, follow where the moments of truth are within the journey, and build an experience that is functional, easy, and accessible and enjoyable. Is very difficult to build that experience unless you take into account the expectations of that relationship, right? You have different kinds of customers and they have different relationship expectations. You have different tiers of customers. You have different types of customers at a regional level. You have different kinds of customers that use different products and services. And it is the expectations of those relationships that are going to help you to better stage what the experience looks like. You cannot ever detach experience outcomes from relationship expectations. So think about those things. Think about especially those two things on the right of the screen, and think about the fact that technology can very effectively build and improve relationships by addressing the definition, the centricity, the engagement, the accountability, the knowledge, the transparency, and experience elements of relationship development. But you first have to be mindful of what relationships need before you throw technology at it. As I wrap up, I want to open up for questions, but I also wanted to encourage you to, use the book, Speaking Frankly About Customer Relationship Management, as a strategic book for implementing technology, especially relationship development enabled technology, technology-enabled relationship development. But if you're thinking more in terms of concepts, the psychology of relationship development, I also encourage you to pick up the book, a copy of my book, Serious Relationships, which is a really fun book to read, and it talks about the 7 elements that we just talked about. And lastly, I want to encourage you to remember that every company has different types of relationships, and that is why it's so important that you address the relationship first before you build experience, and why it is so important that you understand what kind of relationship your company is in before you build technology that makes that relationship, and every effort from sales, marketing, and support to build that relationship in a way that is more functional, enjoyable, and emotionally connecting. I'll stop here. We'll have about 10 minutes. And I encourage you, please, please, please any questions that you have about this concept, the idea that, there are some foundational elements of the experience, that there's some foundational elements of relationship development, and the technology can be a great foundation to making it functional, easy, and enjoyable, to add the perception of cost, to help people feel like they got the outcomes and rewards they expected from what they're investing. Anything at all, I'll be very, very happy to address any question. Thoughts, comments? Hopefully you wrote it down. Maybe I'd love to hear some of the things that you are seeing as a challenge in those 7 areas.
Thank you, JC. Wow. Okay. So whilst we wait for your questions, so we've got 5 minutes. So in that period, please feel free to either raise your hand or drop a question or a comment in the chat. I've shared the link to the book there. Apparently, there's only 1 copy remaining on Amazon, it looks like, for the hard copy there. And then there's also
it's going fast.
That's the Speaking Frankly About Customer Relationships.
Absolutely. And there's 2 books. What I would encourage you to do is what we call the yellow book and the yellow book and the blue book. The yellow book is great for projects, great for setting expectations of technology implementation, especially CRM. And then the blue book makes a great gift for people and teams that are trying to get closer and build relationship closer, that are trying to kind of build stronger relationships with their clients, with their partners.
Fantastic. So I've also shared the link to Dialogue Prime. We want to actually give away membership. So we will be announcing a winner who will actually win a membership to Dialogue Prime. Tell us a little bit about Dialogue Prime, can you, JC?
Yeah, so the concepts that I just shared with you today, both for technologists and for strategists and for business people, are also available as part of a course. And so we've taken a lot of the concepts from both books, and we've created a self-paced learning environment where you can just take the course. Now, we believe that learning the course and reading the book alone is great. It can give you great insights, but it's even better together, right? So the Dialogue Prime community, what we call the serious relationship community, is a community of people that have read the book, that have taken the course, and are meeting on a regular basis and sharing ideas and interacting and exchanging thoughts for improving relationships and using technology to enhance relationships together in a forum and a community where we can benefit from the insights that we bring to the marketplace. So it's a fun place and it's a learning place as well.
That's excellent. So you've given us a lot of food for thought today, JC, and we are about to run out of time shortly. So last couple of minutes for your chance to ask a question. Otherwise, you have the link to JC's book, which as well as the link to the course Dialogue Prime, a community for building business relationships, which that looks very interesting indeed. And it's something which I think we can all benefit from in every aspect of our lives. JC, one final request, JC, is are you able to share your contact details so that the community can keep in touch with you? I will share the link to CRM to the people in the chat, but I can also share your LinkedIn. Is there anything else that you would like us to share for the community to keep in touch with you?
No, that's it. I have the very last slide that's showing on the screen's got my phone number directly and my email directly. So if you feel like reaching out, I encourage you to do that. And I know that we have a global community on right now, so it's a little risky saying this, but I mean it genuinely. If you're struggling with something right now, especially the connection of technology and business, those conversations that sometimes it's hard for the business and technology to reach mutual value, just give me a call, set up a time, let's have a cup of coffee or tea together virtually, and let's talk. I don't charge for that time. I enjoy it. I learn a lot from it. So reach out and let me know how I can support you.
Well, JC, you have been a mentor to myself, and I'm sure to many other people without realizing. So keep up the great work. It was a great pleasure to finally host you today on the final day of the boot camp. It's very late. It's been a 12-day boot camp each day. Sorry, 12-hour boot camp. So we had 12 hours yesterday and 12 hours today. So it's been quite intensive. And I just want to thank you once again for re-energizing the attendees, and we look forward to connecting again, hopefully in person next time.
I look forward to it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Russ, for including me.
Thank you so much, JC. That was JC Quintana, everyone. A very, very inspiring thought leader, someone who really, really helps a lot of people grow in their thoughts and in their approach, especially helps a lot of people in the technology industry in particular. So once again, especially in Microsoft as well. So that was a great pleasure to host JC.